What is up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Fantasy Fellow Show. My name's Kyle. Tonight it is February 20th, so hopefully we're almost done with February into March. We can get to the NFL Combine and start having fun with the NFL Draft. Tonight I'm going to be finishing up my division by division series. So I've already covered a bunch of the divisions. We have the AFC West, which we'll talk about in this video, and then the NFC West. If you guys haven't checked any of these videos out, they're all here for you. Check them out. I kind of give basically the point of this video is to kind of review what happened last year, talk about what went well, what went wrong, and what this team might do to try and fix it in 2025, whether that's, free agency or drafting or just fixing problems or head coach or whatever, So we're going to hop right into the video here. We're going to start with the Denver Broncos. And if you guys are new to my style of video, we're looking at my 2020. Well, this is just my database. I have been logging stats since 2017. I use this to start my projections, and basically the green line here at the top, that's the previous season, 2024, and we just kind of go down from there. The orange line is kind of like a 2-year average, and I kind of like to look at the last 2 years and compare them to see if a team did better or worse. And starting with the Denver Broncos, this is year 2 of Sean Payton. Obviously, we got rid of Russell Wilson. We bring in Bo Nix, and this team theoretically doesn't change all that much from a style standpoint, but the results are so much different than they were with Russell Wilson in 2023. Sean Payton and Joe Lombardi back for another round here. Passing attempts go up, 570 passing attempts compared to 513. Passing yards go up, roughly 3,800 compared to about 3,500. A little bump in completion percentage, which is good to see. Yards per attempt go down a little bit, just more passing that'll happen. Touchdowns go up to 30, interceptions up a little bit, and that's all understand. We're playing with our rookie quarterback here, Bo Nix, and for them to improve upon almost all these numbers here is pretty impressive. So I think if you are a Bronco fan and, we had huge questions like, is Bo Nix the answer coming in? I think he's the answer for now, and now we just got to continue to add people around him and see how this thing goes. He really did play pretty above expectations, I would say. So Bo Nix we're very interested in. The rushing game was very productive, or more productive than it was the year before. Not very productive, but a few more rushing attempts, about 100 more yards, adding 1/10 of a yard per carry here, 12 touchdowns, 6 fumbles. So overall, the Broncos add about almost 400, 300 to 400 yards of offense here. The big one is they ran a lot more plays. We're talking almost 70 more plays compared to 2023. So a little bit more faster pace. Again, more passing attempts in there, better yards per carry, and it led to more touchdowns as well for this team. They go 10-7, 8-9 the year before. Overall, a very significant step forward for Sean Payton and the Broncos. And now I feel like they have a foundation built, and now we're going to kind of carve some things away. So let's talk about Bo Nix here at the quarterback position. For fantasy, man, he was, you were starting him if you needed a quarterback leagues. That's where he provided a ton of value, because he was pretty dirt cheap in a lot of super flex drafts. One QB, he was obviously undrafted and probably on your waiver wire, but Bo Nix finishes as the QB 8 on the year. Let me just change this to the ESPN format, because I know that's 4-point passing touchdowns. Okay, QB 8 on the year, and then we're talking 18 points per game, which was the same as Sam Darnold, roughly Jared Goff. Just really strong and QB1 number. So for him to do this in his rookie season, and honestly, the talent on Denver is not all that great. They have a lot of, receivers there that we're trying to figure out yet. The tight end is non-existent on Denver, and they just have a stable of backs that are kind of just backup level backs. So very, very impressed here. He's kind of doing a Drew Brees impression, just a lot of low A-dot throws, dumping it off to running backs and tight ends, and taking it. He did connect well with Courtland Sutton. So I like Bo Nix. I think, we'll see who they bring back. I have a feeling a lot of these players are coming back. Sutton, Mims, Vele. We'll see about Humphrey. I'd like to see more Troy Franklin. Would love to see this team get a tight end. And then honestly, at running back, they could pretty much do whatever they want. But the evaluation of Bo Nix is, man, he's a top 10, top 12 fantasy QB entering 2025. There might be a little bit of regression built into this, but for now, man, he's running the ball, 430 yards, 4 touchdowns. He's got a really nice rushing floor. and he was throwing touchdowns. So I have no issues with taking Bo Nix as a low-end QB1 in 2025. Now let's talk about the running backs. They used Javonte Williams, who led the team in carries. Julian McLaughlin was one of their more successful runners. Audric Estime, the rookie, played a little bit better and more as the season went on. Tyler Beatty got hurt early on, but he looked like a guy that could break out. And then Blake Watson was another draft pick here. So just looking at Javonte, Jaleel, and at Estime, I don't know if any of these guys is a starting running back in 2025. I think this is the one spot where they can for sure draft. Like if they want to draft, they're not going to draft Javonte. He's not going to be available. But if they want to draft Amarion Hampton, or if they want to draft, one of the Ohio State guys or the Iowa kid, they can totally draft one of the top 5 running backs, and he'll be their top back entering 2025. Sean Payton loves having kind of a 2-back system, a banger, and then a receiving back. If you think about, especially how, Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara were used in the past, David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs are used in that similar fashion now. That's potentially what we could be looking at here. So I think Estime is probably a guy that is a lock to maybe lock out that big back role. And they do like Julian McLaughlin, but I'm very open to one of these. I think Javonte Williams, his contract might be up. So we're going to try and upgrade that overall. But you just weren't starting a Denver Broncos running back in 2024. And, look at all these targets, man. They had 107 targets to the running backs. We had, and I guess if I included Michael Burton, that's more, but 85 receptions to the running backs, a lot of dump offs. So this is a very, very interesting spot for fantasy. If the Broncos draft a running back, we should be very interested in that. The receivers, man, it was Cortland Sutton as the ace all year long. 81 catches, over almost 1,100 yards and 8 touchdowns. Like, he was the red zone guy. He even threw a touchdown to Bo Nix, which was kind of cool. And he got paid. He's going to stay there, and he's going to continue to be the number 1 wide receiver for Bo Nix. And I think he plays pretty well with Bo Nix. And he's probably more like a wide receiver 3 in terms of fantasy, where you're going to start him on your roster. But, for a rookie year, for him to catch 81 passes, over almost 1,100 yards and the 8 touchdowns, I think that's, a good range for him to build on and probably repeat that. Maybe not the touchdowns, but again, to be his number 1 target, I think that's kind of the lock entering this 2025 season. And then Marvin Mims was a guy who really came on late, and he was making some really big plays for this team. He was coming out, Marvin Mims was kind of considered as the Brandon Cooks, especially when Sean Payton drafted him. That was kind of the comp. And I think if you're looking for a guy to take a step next year, it's probably Marvin Mims. I do like Vele. I thought Liljum Humphrey's fine, but he's not a starter. And then we'll see if Troy Franklin can develop and maybe push Vele and Humphrey to be the number 3 receiver. But I think Mims is probably the number 2 entering 2025. And then, we're going to have to really watch this roster and figure out who is going to emerge as the number 3. I wouldn't be surprised if the Broncos draft a guy. I don't know if Humphrey and Reynolds are coming back here, so they could go with Sutton, Mims, Vele, and Franklin at their top 4 and then figure out the bottom of their depth chart. But I wouldn't be opposed to adding, 1 receiver, maybe day 2 or early round 4 or something like that. I think could be a help here. But for sure, the pecking order is Sutton. And then I think Mims will slide into that number 2 productive role. And then we're looking at the tight end, where there's just a wasteland. They used 4 guys here. Dulcich isn't even on the team anymore. Lucas Krull led the way with 19 catches. There's 5 touchdowns thrown to these guys. They combined for almost 500 yards and about 51 catches, 72 targets. There's enough here for a tight end to be fantasy useful if they would consolidate it, but Sean Payton doesn't have a guy. And we've known he's had Jimmy Graham, he's had Marcus Colston, he's had a lot of interesting tight end slot type players that can play their joker role for them, but none of these guys can. Broncos are looking at a tight end in the first round. There's a couple good ones there for them. So that's going to be the primary spot I think the Broncos look to upgrade first, is that tight end spot. They need their ace. They can add a secondary receiver, and then they can for sure look at adding some talent at the running back position. So I'm excited about the Broncos. AFC West is good, guys. It's going to be hard to make the playoffs, especially with the Chiefs and the Chargers in there. But the Broncos are going to compete for a wild card spot again in 2025. Let's move on to the Kansas City Chiefs, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on the Chiefs. Like, the Chiefs are so rinse and repeat. We know what's going on here. They go 15-2 in this season here. Matt Nagy's second season as the OC. And this team threw the ball less in 2024 compared to 2023, about 2 times less per game. And the completion percentage goes up. yards per attempt go down. Pat Mahomes didn't even throw for 4,000 yards. It was Wentz that got him over this number. And then 26 touchdowns. This is, these are career lows in the Patrick Mahomes era with Andy Reid. Just over 4,000 yards, 26 touchdowns. These are very, very low numbers for the Chiefs standards. That's because they kind of leaned on the running game. And Pacheco got hurt early. Kareem Hunt, they signed him, and Hunt looked really good for most of the year. He was kind of a plotter for a little bit, but he was very effective catching the ball and punching in touchdowns from the goal line. And he was kind of the identity of the offense. They were going to run the ball with Kareem Hunt. They were going to move the ball to Kelsey and Worthy and some of the other receivers here. And they did rush for 15 touchdowns. So despite the low yards per carry, which again, that was the lowest in the Mahomes era, still productive enough for them to win 15 games. So I think just looking at this 2024 season, from the top view, this was the worst statistical season for Patrick Mahomes. And a lot of that was, with Rashee Rice getting down early, Isaiah Pacheco getting hurt early, Hollywood Brown not playing until the end of the year. The Chiefs were kind of put, they had both hands behind their back early in the year with Pacheco, Rice, and then Hollywood Brown down because they had big plans for these guys. And then it was very clear that like Juju, Justin Watson, Hardman, Remigio, some of these tight ends, it just wasn't enough for them to be an elite offense, but it was good enough for them to win games. And I think the big idea entering 2025 is figuring out ways to keep these guys healthy. I think you saw Xavier Worthy blossom into a potential, top 20 dynasty receiver. Rashee Rice is going to get suspended for a good portion of the 2025 season. So I think Worthy will probably be the first Chief drafted for skill players. And for good reason, man. He was one of the best receivers down the stretch. He was fantastic in the playoffs. Huge Super Bowl despite the blowout. And, he's a guy that really grew his game over the year from just being kind of like a deep speed, end around kind of guy. He became more and more polished as the year went on. So we have glimpses of Xavier Worthy being a really good weapon for Mahomes. Obviously, Rashee Rice was going to smash if he stayed healthy all year. So they have two stud receivers locked and loaded. And then if they do bring Marquise Brown back, I think he could be a nice number 3. But we do need to find maybe one more receiver on this team via draft or free agency because Hopkins just couldn't cut it. Watson's whatever. Juju's whatever. We need at least one more viable target here, especially if Hollywood Brown doesn't come back. And then the tight end, man, Travis Kelsey, it's probably time to let it go, man. Still caught 97 passes, but only 823 yards, 8.5 yards per catch, 3 touchdowns. It's just, he can go out there and kind of be a shell of himself still, but he's just, I think it's time for him to probably set the sails, man. He could come back for one more year, but I don't think we're going to draft him for fantasy purposes. Noah Gray actually looked really good. 40 catches on 49 targets, 437 yards and 5 TDs. He looks like he could step into a tight end 1 role if Kelsey were to leave. So that's probably the number one thing with the Chiefs offense is seeing if Kelsey retires first, because that could change a lot of their draft and their free agency plans. But I do think Noah Gray can step into the tight end 1 role. If Kelsey does retire, I would imagine people are going to overreact and just shoot Noah Gray to the moon. He's probably going to be a top 10 tight end, top 12 tight end. I don't know if he has the Travis Kelsey upside to be that tight end 1 overall that we've seen for all those years. And then the running backs, man. Isaiah Pacheco was looking good early. Gets hurt, misses almost probably more than half the year, and then leads way to Kareem Hunt. Carson Steele, he's just the backup level guy. Samaje Perine's a fantastic pass catcher, so I wonder if he comes back and he stays in that, McKinney role that we've seen, the Jerick McKinnon role that we've seen for the last few seasons with the Chiefs. So I'm open to that. But can Isaiah Pacheco stay healthy? He didn't look good to end the season either. They still were playing Kareem Hunt over Pacheco. So he needs a healthy offseason. I'm open to the Chiefs drafting a running back, honestly. Because I don't know if they're going to bring back Kareem Hunt. If they want to go into the year with Pacheco and Pirine as their top 2 backs, that's fine. But potentially opening up the idea of, drafting a guy, whether it's round 2, 3, 4, that can compete with Pacheco and be a 1-2 punch, I'm open to that as well. And then obviously Mahomes, not a great season for Mahomes. If you drafted him, he was the top 5 draft pick at the quarterback position. He does finish as QB 11, but again, easily his worst season. Actually, in 2023, he had a worse season fantasy-wise because he didn't run any touchdowns in. But this is a huge outlier for back-to-back seasons now. So one of these years, I would expect him to get back to these 20-plus points per games. But for now, I don't think he's a top 10 fantasy QB. until we see the domino pieces that fall the Chiefs' way, via the free agency or the draft. So it's hard to judge this team because they're so well coached. You have Pat Mahomes, you have promising receivers Worthy and Rice, but we need to figure out what we're doing with Kelsey, and they need to figure out if they're bringing Hunt back or they're going to commit to Pacheco or bring in a rookie to compete with Pacheco. So a lot of moving pieces here, but again, Chiefs get blown out in the Super Bowl, still a successful year. I mean, if you're a Chiefs fan, you're expecting to win the Super Bowl at this point almost every year with Mahomes. So it was not a successful year, but nonetheless, it was the most successful regular season for Patrick Mahomes. So kind of funny for them to go 15-2 and have the worst offensive output of Mahomes' career. Brighter days are ahead, and I want to see this team kind of restore back to its run and gun days. But that's enough of the Chiefs. Let's move on to the LA Chargers, who I think surprised a lot of people. First year with Jim Harbaugh, Greg Roman at the OC spot. Chargers go 11-6, and they get this thing turned around pretty quickly here. We knew coming in that Harbaugh was going to run the ball a lot with Greg Roman. I did not expect the efficiency for Justin Herbert, though, to kind of swing back towards what we've known from him under Staley in some of his early seasons. Herbert was very, very good, threw for about 3,900 yards, 23 touchdowns, only 3 interceptions, and he ran the ball for 306 yards, 2 touchdowns, and he did have a fumble in there. But Herbert was, a guy that we weren't drafting in QB1 leagues because we were nervous they're going to run the ball. And if you drafted him in a Superflex league, you were probably pretty happy, especially, it took them about a month and a half or so to get this thing figured out and for Ladd McConkey to get fired up and some of the other players to get up to speed. But Herbert was a QB1 down the stretch. He did finish as QB12, but I would say during, the last month and a half or so of football, he was probably a top 10 to almost a top 5 QB for fantasy. And I expect him to take another step forward this year, just another year in the system. And the Chargers are one of the teams that it's amazing how much they got out of this team. J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards, everyone kind of laughed at that running back duo to start the year. The receivers, where's the stud receiver? Well, I think we got one in Ladd McConkey. And then we don't have a tight end on this team, but they found a way to manage with what they had. Now, at the running back position, Gus Edwards, I hope they bring him back. I think I'd like to see him go. But I'm open to bringing back J.K. Dobbins. If they don't bring back either of these two guys, though, look for the Chargers to draft one of these top 5 running backs in the class this year. But Dobbins was exceptional, like almost 200 carries, 900 yards, 9 touchdowns, and he was the lead receiving back, 32 catches, 38 targets, 153 yards. And he looks like a guy that has overcome the Achilles, and he's ready to kind of maintain this RB1 workload, or maybe just be the 1A in a system like this. And I think it's hard to project the Chargers going into 2025 without knowing what they're going to do in free agency, but we'll see that very shortly if they bring back Dobbins. Maybe they bring back Dobbins and draft a running back here. We'll see what happens. But I for sure want to see Gus Edwards go. Kamani Vidal is fine, but I just think he's a backup level type guy. Haskins is down there. So a lot of focus will be on the running game for 2025. And I think the Chargers are basically a lock to either draft a player or bring in another veteran here for Gus Edwards. So we'll look at the receivers next year. Ladd McConkey blew up for 82 catches, 1,149 yards, and 7 touchdowns. He was the go-to guy. And when he started clicking, that's when Herbert started clicking. And then the other pieces started clicking in there too. Now, Quentin Johnston also had, if you're Quentin Johnston, you had such a bad rookie year. This was what you wanted to see. This was a positive step forward for Quentin Johnston. 55 catches, 91 targets, 711 yards, and 8 touchdowns. Like, he's not a number 1 receiver, but he can be a receiver that's, out there for your number 2 or number 3 role. He has a lot to offer still, and I think we could see another step forward in 2025. So I like Quentin Johnston. I don't think he's a fantasy starter because he's going to be inconsistent, but for sure open to him in best ball leagues. And I think your dynasty shares, you hold on to him and see what he looks like in year 3. And sometimes it does take guys 3 years to get going and comfortable in the NFL. And Josh Palmer, I don't know if they're bringing him back or if he's a free agent, but he was their number 3. I'd like to upgrade that position. Darius Davis is kind of a trick starter guy there with the rushing attempts and some of the deep ball action. But Fehoko, Reagor, DJ Chark, we need the Chargers to draft another receiver. They drafted McConkey. They've drafted Quentin Johnston. I would like to see at least one more player because they do like to do some 3 receiver sets and things like that. I just don't know if Palmer is I just don't know if Palmer's the long-term answer here. So whether they sign a guy. I mean, T. Higgins has been linked to the Chargers. Chris Godwin would be kind of cool, but he overlaps with McConkey a bit. We'll see. The Chargers are probably a lock to draft a receiver, I would say, at this point. And then the tight end room, Will Dissly, man, I was starting Will Dissly for like a month at least. He had a nice little stretch here. So I don't know if they're going to commit to him and let him be the guy or one of these stud tight ends early in the draft that are available. But Dissly led the way. Stone Smart's been kind of like a practice squad journeyman for them over the last few seasons, and he had some productive play. But it was all Will Dissly here. And then they used Hayden Hurst, Tucker Fisk, a lot of guys to block. They like to bring in those guys to run the ball. And Will Dissly's a fantastic blocker. So for him to be the lead receiver and the lead blocker, I think it turned out pretty well. And I don't know, again, Chargers could draft a tight end, but if they go in with the season with Will Dissly, he should be on our fantasy radar, at least as a tight end too. And then overall, man, Chargers got a lot out of this team, despite not having a lot of talent. I think Ladd McConkey's a stud. I want to draft him as a wide receiver one. I think he's the new, version of Keenan Allen for Justin Herbert. And he's going to continue to – he's probably going to flirt with almost 100 catches, I think, in 2025. So he's one of the stud breakouts, I think, entering 2025. And then, again, we have to figure out the running back situation, the tight end situation. And then I'm open to taking shots on Quentin Johnston for my bench and deeper options. Now, I did skip the Las Vegas Chargers here, just alphabetically. What are you going to do? But let's talk about the Raiders here because they have a lot of work to do, guys. Antonio Pierce out. Luke Getsy, another try, another swing and a miss for Getsy. Scott Turner even got a try here. The Raiders just they weren't set up to succeed to begin with here. Their quarterbacks were Minshew, Aiden O'Connell, Desmond Ridder. The ugliest group of running backs, Alexander Madison, Amir Abdullah, Sincere McCormick, and Zamir White. The receivers were kind of a joke. Devontae Adams skipped town, stole his Taco Bell franchises and went to New York. And then Jacoby Myers played. He's a good player. He was the lead guy. And then this team was all about Brock Bowers for pretty much the entire year. That's the story of the Raiders is Brock Bowers is a stud. He should be the first tight end taken in every drafts in 2025. And man, like early as round 2, I think I'm taking Brock Bowers, and he's going to continue to be the tight end 1, I think, for the next few years. The Raiders just got to figure out who's going to be their quarterback. I don't even want to talk about Minshew, O'Connell, Ridder. Like, we have to figure out who the quarterback is. Are we going to draft somebody? Are we going to move up for Shedeur? Are we going to go for Sam Darnold? What are we doing at the quarterback position here? I think Tom Brady has some say in this as well. But this is what I believe is the absolute bottom for the Raiders. They're going to continue to be the worst team in the AFC West for at least one more year while they get this thing turned around. But Pete Carroll is kind of exciting. We'll see what he can do too. But this team needs a quarterback. They need a starting running back. We need starting receivers. The whole thing could be gutted. I think you stick with Jacoby Myers, you stick with Brock Bowers, and you say, okay, let's bring in some guys around these two. And we got to figure out who our running back is going to be. I think Amir Abdullah is a good receiving back. I think Sincere McCormick actually was their best runner in 2024, but he did get hurt. I don't know if he's going to be ready for the start of the year. So I'm hopeful the Raiders draft a running back. They should draft one of the top 5 running backs. They should draft maybe 2 receivers. I don't think anything outside of Jacoby Myers. Trey Tucker's fine. He might stay there, but we need talent at pretty much all the main positions here, but tight end. So I'm not going to waste too much time with the Raiders. This is the AFC West divisional preview. I got one more to do, man. I got the NFC West here, and we're going to finish it off. And then I'm going to be going full bore on the NFL draft. And if you guys are new to my stuff or have not checked out thefantasyfellowship.com, I've started to roll out some things here. I have the consensus 2025 NFL draft rankings. I'm going to update those tomorrow. Just because I update them, every other week. And then I'm starting to roll out some articles. I did put some things out there today. These are free articles for you guys. You guys can check them out. The top 5 running backs in the class, the top 5 receivers. And, I just kind of go in and let you guys see a little peek behind the curtain here, get a little bit of their profile and their draft outlook, things like that. And if you guys want to be a member, and I'm going to put a free version of this, but I'm starting to put out my prospect profiles. I did put out the receiver ones today. That's my favorite position. But this is a huge document. It's got everything you need in here before these guys get to the combine. There's a consensus top 15 rankings for the receivers. And then it kind of goes through, their background, their college stats, their strengths, their weaknesses, We got some comparisons, we got some scouting reports, some draft projections, team fits, and then some final thoughts here. This 67 pages worth of stuff here. So if you guys want to check it out, I'm going to be getting all that stuff. I think I'm going to be posting the running backs hopefully tomorrow, or if not Sunday. So check back for that. The Fantasy Fellowship is going to be pumping out a lot of content. So I'm excited for what's coming next. Thank you for watching this. Don't forget to subscribe, like the video, comment. It helps people find this video if it was helpful to anybody. And yeah, thank you for your time. We'll see you next time. Peace.
Got me feeling icy.